A few years ago, someone offered me a school, not a class, a whole school, mediumship students, certification programs, the whole thing. I'd been studying there just about 2 years, and the woman who built it, a registered medium up in Lilydale, sat me down and asked if I would take it over and run it. I said yes. And then a few months later, I gave it back and I walked away. I want to tell you about that because the reason I left is tangled up with the one thing on this whole channel I'm actually sure of. I am a medium. Not because anyone handed me a piece of paper that says so. I'll explain why the paper doesn't matter. And here's something I'll say once and then just let it sit true for the rest of this. Mediumship? None of it ever asked me to believe in anything. Not a God, not a doctrine, not one article of faith. It won't ask that of you either, whether you're the one giving the reading or the one sitting down to get one. Okay, let me back up because none of this makes sense without the few years that got me here. If you've been around here, you know I didn't show up in a robe with a crystal ball. This channel is for people who are curious about the big stuff, but allergic to being handed a system. Spiritual maybe, but not willing to switch their own brain off to get there. I'm not trying to be your guru. I'd rather you have one real conversation with yourself than 100 tidy ones with me. But I got here the long way, the long, windy way. What got me moving was grief. And not one clean grief either, the kind that gets into everything. There's the grief of finding out a favorite person has died, and however you find out. And there's the grief nobody really lets you call grief. The people who are still alive, but gone from your life anyway. The friendship that changed, the family you have to love from a distance. The grief of loving someone you cannot save. I've come to think it doesn't matter much what kind it is. Grief is grief. We mourn people who die, sure, but we also mourn a habit we couldn't keep or one we couldn't quit, a belief we outgrew, a version of ourselves we don't get to be anymore. Almost any real change asks you to grieve something on the way through it. I'm not going to walk you through all my particular versions of that today. I've told some of those stories already, and I'll probably tell more. The point here isn't the stories, it's what they did. They turned my attention inward after it had been pointed outward for a very long time. And I'll be straight about one thing, because it matters later. Turning inward wasn't new ground for me. My education, my day job, the work I trained for, being both concerned and curious about other people's experiences, especially when they're going through the hardest stretches of their lives. I know my way around the inner world. I just spent years pointing all of that at everybody but me. So when grief finally turned me around, what I went looking for wasn't a medium or a message or anything spiritual. It was a workshop on self-love. That's it. I drove to a little spiritualist town in Western New York at a very low point, looking for that in a weekend to breathe. I had just dropped my husband off at rehab. I wasn't shopping for a religion. I figured I didn't have a spiritual bone in my body. Beyond AA and a higher power I'd always wrestled with. And then I sat in a meditation class, eyes closed, expecting nothing, and I noticed light, color, warmth moving across my face like the sun through a window. I actually thought, oh, I didn't realize there was a skylight up there. Listen, there was no skylight, no lights on at all, just a ceiling and me. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't a message from beyond. It was my own awareness, finally getting my attention. That's a thing I know now, and I'll keep saying it Awareness doesn't start. It reveals itself. It was already there. I just hadn't looked. So I followed it. Somebody told me to meditate every day and see what happened. And what happened is I couldn't stop. I went back. I signed up for what I thought was more meditation, and it turned out to be a beginner mediumship course. I was probably the last person in the room who expected to be any good at it. And then I went all in, because I do that. A couple of years of it. Awareness training, a 9-month program that ended in a non-denominational ordination, a certification in Jungian assessment tool built on color and symbol in the subconscious. That one's not woo, it's straight psychology. Energy healing, animal communication, remote viewing, where I'd once described a stranger's backyard I had never seen, and he confirmed every detail of it. Weekly circles, picture readings, public readings, private readings, a second ordination, this time in the Spiritualist church, and finally a formal certification as a medium from that school in Lilydale. I'll tell you what all of it cost. A lot of money, a lot of weekends, and a lot of years. 7 now and counting, because I'm not done. I don't think you're ever done. I don't list all that to wave credentials in your face. I list it so I can tell you something true that took me too long to learn, and that you should know before you ever sit down across from anyone who calls themselves a medium. None of those pieces of paper make me a medium. They prove I took the classes and paid the fees. That's all. A certificate is evidence that I showed up and wrote a check. It is not evidence that anything real happens when I work. It says nothing about whether I'm any good at this or whether I'm honest. So if you go looking for a medium, don't be impressed by a wall of certifications or an honored title from any church or assembly. Ask what they actually bring through. Watch how they carry themselves, whether they hand you specific checkable evidence or whether they just wrap you in something warm until your person is at peace and sends their love, which could be anyone's person and costs nothing to say. I'm not in the love and light wallpaper business. I'm not in the rigid belief business either. What makes a medium is the evidence and the honesty to stay accountable to it. Nothing hanging on a wall does that. Which brings me back to the school. By the time that offer came, I looked on paper like someone who had arrived, certified, ordained twice, teaching. And the whole time, I'd been ignoring something I already knew. The place had hardened. What pulled me to it in the first place was where it came from. A community founded by free thinkers, people who cared more about asking honestly than agreeing on any answer. But what I was living day to day had set into something else. Doctrine, hierarchy, the sense that somebody a step above you had the correct reading of your own experience, and your job was to nod and take it. And under all the spiritual language, the regular machinery of any small closed group, the politics, the ranking, the pressure to belong on their terms instead of yours. I sat with that a long time before I let myself understand it. And the thing that finally let me stop taking it personally is that it isn't personal. It's a pattern. Almost every wild, original idea eventually gets a structure put up around it, and then the structure grows rules, and the rules start to matter more than the thing that built them. It happens to nearly everything once it gets named and organized. So I wasn't betrayed, and I'm not bitter. I just paid attention, and the same attention that started all of this, and it was pointing at the door. So I left quietly. I gave the school back before I had ever fully taken it. And here's the line I most want you to hear. I didn't leave mediumship. I left the structure, the closed assembly, the quiet bargain of folding myself into a religion just to be allowed to do the work. The work came with me. It was never theirs to keep because it was never theirs to give. And leaving is what finally taught me what the work actually asks of me, which is not a certificate, not a belief. It asks me to get out of my own way. This is the part I didn't see coming. Once I was really doing mediumship, I found out the ongoing job isn't collecting more training. It's housekeeping, my housekeeping internally, because everything I haven't dealt with, my ego, my need to be right, my old wounds, my worry about how I'm being judged, whatever I happen to believe about myself on any given day, all of it gets in the way. It's noise on the line. A reading is cleanest when there's as little of me in it as possible. So the inner work I walked in doing, the self-love, the knowing myself, the cleaning up of my own stuff, it never graduated into wisdom I get to file away. It is the craft. It's maintenance, and it doesn't end. The day I decide I'm finished working on myself is the day I start getting in the way of the evidence. That's why I'm still at it, not to get enlightened, to stay out of the way. So here's what the evidence looks like when I am out of the way. Specific, sometimes uncomfortably specific. A woman will come through and let me know she used to flick her cigarette at you. And your whole face changes because you know exactly who that is. A nickname two people only ever used, the way somebody loved their truck, or mangled the same saying for 40 years, or laughed at the wrong moment. Little things that mean nothing to me and everything to you, landing one after another until they add up to a person you recognize. When you can hold what comes through up against your own life and say, yes, that's her, that's him, that happened, that is the evidence. That's the only thing in this whole field that has ever been worth anything. And here's where I turn it back to you, because this is the part that actually matters. My story is not your evidence. I've been sharing the highlights of my path, and I'll gently ask you to set most of it down. It's mine. It might be interesting to some. It doesn't prove anything to you. Same goes for any medium with a big following and a great story. It's all very lovely. Proves nothing about the continuity of life. The only evidence that will ever mean anything to you is the kind you can check yourself. And you don't have to believe anything to go looking for it. That's the thing I said I'd let stay true. No faith required on either side of the table. Just honesty, attention, and a willingness to hold what you're given up against what you already know. It's testable. That's the quiet, almost strange part of it. If you've lost someone and some corner of you wonders whether any of them is still reachable, you don't have to take my word for it or anyone's. You can find out yourself. And if you ever want to, my door's open. It's all at mediumaamylynn.com. No membership, nothing to sign. You'd come away with something real or you wouldn't. And either way, it would be yours. So that's the half I'm sure of. The work is real. The evidence is real. You can go and gather your own, and none of it needs belief to happen. Here's the half I will never be sure of, at least I don't think. I don't know what consciousness is. I don't know what actually continues when a body stops. I've got experiences, a lot of them. They tell me something does because it keeps reaching back and being specific about it. But how it moves, why it comes through clear for some people and stays quiet for others, I don't know. I've got a hunch and a little guesswork, and I've stopped dressing that up as anything more. The second I reach for a tidy answer to cover the gap, I've traded the truth for something comfortable, And I didn't come this far to start doing that. People ask how I do this with no religion behind it, no God, no scripture, no creed. And the plain answer is that belief was never running the engine. This was never about gods. It's about consciousness. And consciousness has never once asked me to believe in it. It just asked me to pay attention. That part I can do. So I hold what I've got and I leave the rest open. And I've made a kind of peace with the not knowing. More than peace, really. I've come to think the not knowing is the honest place to stand. Because here's something I've noticed. The moment you name a mystery, you've already changed it. You've started organizing it, tidying it, turning a living thing into a label so you can carry it around. And the thing itself, the actual mystery, slips out the back while you're busy naming it. I'd rather stay in the room with the thing than walk out holding a label of it. So I don't trust certainty. I trust what shows up, the detail, the recognition, the way a room shifts, the way a true thing lands. I trust the experience, and I let the explanation stay unfinished. There's one more thing before the big question, and it's a softer one. All this reaching and recognizing and continuing, it was never only about people. There's a cat. Well, there have been a lot of cats I've loved and lost, but there's one, a big ginger creature named Walter, and he has a whole story of his own. It's some of the plainest evidence I've ever been handed that awareness reaches right across the line we call the end. So that's where I'm going next, to him. It's the tender one. Give yourself a minute for that. And after that, the real question. The one this whole channel has been circling since the very first thing I posted. Not whether it's real. We've gone as far with that as I can take you. The question is what consciousness even is. Not as a belief, not as a doctrine, as an experience. The thing that moves and recognizes and continues. The thing I keep running into in this work and still can't explain. That's the door I'm walking through next. You don't have to know, you don't have to believe, you just have to stay with the evidence. Know yourself, own your knowing, trust your good work. That's the whole spell. And here's a little extra ditty I want to share. Lilydale. I am not bashing Lilydale. It is a great little town in Pomfret, New York. It's beautiful. It sits on Cassadaga Lake. It's a community of truly beautiful people, well-intended people. Visit there, explore the grounds, the Leolin Woods, the pet cemetery, the ferry trail. There's so much going on there. And see the mediums. Take a class. Do all of it. Even explore joining the assembly. I encourage you to do all of that. Just because of my opinion, my experience of something, I am not knocking the place. It's a beautiful place. I want you to go there, experience it. Okay, that's all I wanted to say.